What are the further implications of the Department of Justice concluding no Russia collusion, no obstruction by President Trump based on the Mueller Report? And why did the House Judiciary Committee vote unanimously for the DOJ to release to Congress all records on the FBI obstruction of justice and counterintelligence probes against the president? And could the Mueller investigation results lead to a bipartisan investigation of the Fisa courts? This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Today we sit down with Texas Congressman Louie Gohmert. We discuss the conclusions of the Mueller investigation, the recent bipartisan vote by the House Judiciary Committee, the FISA process, and securing privacy rights for Americans. Congressman Gohmert, pleasure to speak with you.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the big item of the day, the Mueller Report. The findings have been summarized. We know the conclusion has been no obstruction, no collusion on the side of President Trump campaign or president. What's your take on all this?
Well, it's what most of us knew, that there was no collusion between anybody with the Trump campaign and Russia trying to affect the election. Obviously, the Trump campaign wanted to win the election and affected it in that way, but never colluding with the Russians. And in fact, it was a big joke the day he said, hey, Russia, if you're listening, something about the emails. But the truth is that there was more colluding between the Democrats and the Russians. And early on, I didn't even realize that Steele had not been to Russia in years. He did his so-called investigation by phone. I mean, he didn't even know for sure who he was talking to. What kind of minions of Putin was he talking to? He didn't know. And, of course, that came out later among the FBI and the DOJ. And so they at least knew for the last 2 or 3 warrants they got that Steele was not trustworthy, they couldn't rely on him. Even FBI would no longer consider him trustworthy. They also knew that the one story by Michael Isikoff was totally based on Steele's. And, we called it the dossier so much. I used to think dossier sounds so official, Mm-hmm. Well, now it's become a pejorative because of how badly abused it was. It's that's why I was calling the Mueller investigation the Mueller dossier, because it is a pejorative now, the way it's been used. But they've wrapped our country in this scandal that didn't exist for 2 years.
Right.
And it's time to bring it to an end. And I really believe if Rosenstein had been left to his own situation there without having a new AG, I doubt that we would have a report even now. I just know Mueller wanted to drag this thing out as long as he possibly could, and hopefully to destroy Trump's election in 2020.
So, you've never been a big fan of this investigation, but what about now with the results?
No, I'm still not. It still reeks of Mueller's bias and prejudice against the man that refused to hire him 24 hours or so before he took up the role of special counsel. A proper ethical prosecutor does not investigate to exonerate. That's not his job. His job is, if there is evidence, you investigate of a crime, you investigate that crime, and if you find evidence that amounts to probable cause that a crime was committed and that this person committed the crime, you present it to a grand jury, and you get an indictment if you've established probable cause. And then you go to court and you get a conviction. That's the prosecutor's job, not to exonerate. So it was a typical slap by a man often without conscience, Robert Mueller. And yes, I know there's some Republicans who say, oh yeah, he's completely, everybody trusts and respects him. I don't, because apparently I know him better than the people that are saying that. But to say, we found no evidence of collusion, but this does not exonerate him. Well, that wasn't his job. That was nothing more than a slap at President Trump. That's all. It's not his job to say we exonerate. You don't find a good prosecutor ever saying, well, we may not have found evidence that he's guilty, but we sure aren't exonerated. You don't say that.
Right.
You say there's not enough evidence to even as bad as Comey was, his statement was that, gee, there's evidence here, but no good prosecutor would ever pursue Hillary Clinton. Well, he was wrong about that. But so I think it's good that the investigation has come to an end. And look at it. I know there are people like in our committee hearing today who are heralding, look at all of the indictments, of all the Russians. There is not one case that the special counsel brought or that he handed off that could not have been done without all the millions of dollars in the special counsel's office. Everything they did, including looking at Cohen and finding things he was guilty of,
Right.
any of that could have been handled by the DOJ without a special counsel, every bit of it.
So, you mentioned exoneration. Now, the president has said total exoneration. A number of other people said this is actually complete exoneration. What's your take on that?
Well, if you're the person that's had the colonoscopy, figuratively speaking, for the last 2 years, then it would feel like, and it's not inappropriate to say it's exoneration because that's the way they should feel. There's nothing there. But, of course, there's some bitterness, I think, from Mueller and Weissman and some of their lackeys that they didn't go forward with an obstruction of justice. But, everybody, most anybody who's paid attention to news knows that Rosenstein volunteered to wear a wire. I thought he might deny it when it came public, but he didn't deny it. He said, I was joking. We know he wasn't joking. And in fact, my understanding before McCabe ever did the interview that went public was that Rosenstein was being confronted by McCabe and Strzok and some of these others, and they were fussing at him because you're not one of our team. You're not a team player. You did this memo that justified the firing of Comey. And being challenged that he wasn't on the team that was wanting to take out Trump, he responded, oh, yeah, in essence, I am a team player. I'm one of you guys. I'm with your team. I'll even wear a wire if you want me to. I'll wear a wire in and record the president. And, according to McCabe, yes, he was serious, and he brought it up at a subsequent meeting a second time. Now, my understanding before that went public was that he did bring it up a second time, and that it was a meeting where he was still trying to prove, I'm part of the team that's trying to take out Trump. And so, by the way, I was serious. I'll wear a wire. I'll record the president, and something to that effect. And McCabe, there was apparently 3 people at that meeting, and McCabe immediately had a meeting with his deputies after that and said, you won't believe it. And again, this not quoting, but basically saying, you won't believe Rosenstein just brought up again. He's willing to wear a wire into the Oval Office to show he's one of our team trying to take out the president. So that's where we are. Rosenstein needs to go. And yes, I know Barr had Rosenstein's agreement on the summary that they did, and on the fact that there is not adequate evidence to
for obstruction.
For obstruction of anything to prosecute. But again, as long as Jeff Sessions was there, or when Jeff was gone and it was Matt Whitaker, they didn't really have anybody that would stand up for what was right against Rosenstein. And so I'm not sure if we had not gotten a new attorney general that seems to say, look, if you got something, let's go prosecute. If you don't, let's don't drag this out 2 more years. And I'm surmising here, but knowing Mueller as I do, I don't believe he would stop the investigation if Rosenstein were still acting AG or basically acting as the deputy with Matt Whitaker just giving him free rein. I don't think he would have stopped now. I think he would have just kept going, but now they've got a real AG, and it didn't make sense to keep spending millions of dollars.
So, in the aftermath of the, report being summarized, the House Judiciary Committee, you guys voted 22-0, and a rare, fully bipartisan vote, basically to approve a resolution that will give Congress all the records on the FBI obstruction of justice and counterintelligence probes against, on the president. Tell me a little bit about how that came about and how it's even possible to have a vote like that.
Well, the resolution was basically going after any information, transcripts, recordings, anything regarding Rosenstein's statement that he was willing to wear a wire and tape the president. So it was unanimous, but from 2 entirely different standpoints.
Okay.
From the standpoint of the Republicans, this sounds like an attempted coup. They were sitting discussing the treasonous act of trying to eliminate a sitting president from the office of president. And this is so serious, we need to have more information about it, because Rosenstein wasn't being truthful. It didn't appear to me. He was truthful at the time any more than he was about some other things. It was clear he wasn't true on. But so from the Democratic standpoint, they're looking at it saying, well, if Rosenstein was willing to wear a wire into the Oval Office in order to use the 25th Amendment to try to take out a president, he must have really thought the president was crazy, and therefore we need all of those conversations. We need to find out who was really pointing out how crazy and what actions were they discussing of the president, which was evidence that he was not fit to remain in office.
So there's recordings of all these discussions?
No, we don't know that.
Okay.
Well, the NSA probably has recordings of everything we don't know about, but as far as recordings of that, I think it may fall in the category of official statement by Hillary Clinton. They don't want any recordings because she may have said something that might incriminate her, and they don't want any recordings when they interviewed her. That's
Okay.
a little sarcasm there, but I think it's true. They didn't record Hillary when they were questioning her because they were afraid she might have incriminated herself. But anyway, that's probably part of the deal that Bill Clinton worked out with Loretta Lynch when they met in that tarmac meeting. Again, surmising.
Right. So, well, what's next now that Mueller Report is, out and investigation is over? You mentioned a little bit earlier about kind of the other side of the coin, the other collusion. What do you think the next step is?
Well, I do think we need to get to the bottom of what happened with the Fisa court, with the pursuit of warrants, with the unmasking of so many Americans' names, Sally Yates and others, who shouldn't have been in a position to unmask names. And then we find out now there was an order back, a motion and order back in 2012. I didn't know about just the last few weeks.
Okay, what's that?
It was a motion to allow greater revealing of classified information, which included unmasking and transcripts and information around the unmasking to people that were not previously allowed to get that information. And one of the reasons was if it helps this person understand more about the issue they're working on. Well, that could be anything.
Very broad.
That is so broad. I had no idea that they made a motion and got a court to order secretly that they could. It's been declassified for public review, but I didn't see it until just the last couple of weeks. But when I read that language, and I've read a lot of language as a judge and as a Chief Justice, and that's why I read so much of the language here in Congress. Words mean things, but when you say something like, if it helps them understand the information they're reviewing, something of that sort, that could be
carte blanche.
That's anybody, anything. And that apparently, since we didn't know it went back this far, but back to 2012 during the Obama administration, that they could spread classified information to people that should never have really gotten it, but for the ridiculous motion and order of the court. And another issue, and I was talking with Jerry Nadler about this today, that you guys need to join us. And I'm okay if we throw out the FISA courts, but at least we have got to rein in their power. I mean, it is basically a star chamber. And when I came to that conclusion was after WikiLeaks released, it's an application for a warrant affidavit on which it was based, and the subsequent order of Verizon. Now, our constitutional obligations, prosecutor, to get a warrant, you have to show a number of probable cause issues, but you also have to describe with particularity the item, the places to be searched, and particularity, the items to be seized with the warrant.
Right.
And if you go back and read the application, the affidavit, and the order, it basically says, we just want all this information, everything Verizon's got on every single person in America. And, the affidavit said, yeah, we really need every bit of information Verizon has. And then the judge signs off going, yeah, give them every bit of information you've got on every single customer they've got. And I'm going, there is no particularity. There's nothing specific in here. Right. This is not the way warrants are supposed to work. Right. I was so deeply offended, and that's what really awoken me about, we got to do something about this. This is way too much power. And when you realize that those FISA hearings for warrants, those are ex parte. There's only one side. There is nobody representing the interest of the person to be searched or wiretapped, whatever. And there's really no person looking out for the Constitution, because it sure isn't the prosecutor. We used to think we have a Department of Justice, they'll look out for the Constitution. Right. Well, we've seen they don't. They look every way they can to, especially in the Obama years, to override it. And they have successfully. So anyway, that whole system has got to be reviewed. That we didn't always have a FISA court, this secret court. If you had things that pertain to national intelligence or international investigations that might harm national security, you had to talk to the judge in chambers and, make a full showing why it was so critical. And back then, prosecutors were nervous. Is this judge going to allow us to keep this secret? And so they really had to make a strong case. Once they had the FISA court, now we find out they 99.9% of the time, apparently, they waltz in, get whatever they want signed in the way of a warrant. We shouldn't have a court like that. And the thing that really frustrates me and sets all the warning sounds off for me is the fact that we had one or more FISA courts that signed these 4 warrants regarding the Trump campaign, and they were lied to. There was a fraud committed upon their court. These people knew for at least 3 of the warrants they sought that Steele could not be trusted, and the FBI didn't trust him, and they moved him out as somebody. They never told the court that. They lied and kept saying he was trustworthy. And they knew the Isikoff story was based on Steele. It was not a corroborating piece of evidence. Yet they used that as corroborating evidence, knowing it wasn't. It was a complete fraud upon the FISA court. The fact that whoever that judge or judges is or have not put any of those lawyers in jail tells me the FISA system is broken. Any judge worth their salt would have called these lawyers in and said, you got to show cause why you shouldn't go to jail for the fraud you committed upon my court. That hadn't happened. We've heard nothing like that happening, and I feel sure we would have if it had happened. And we would have known when certain people went to jail before for the fraud upon the court. None of that's happened. So that tells me the FISA court system is broken. We do not have appropriate judges in the FISA system. Something's got to be done to protect Americans' constitutional rights.
Okay, so what form are you calling for an investigation of the FISA process? Right now there's all sorts of congressional investigations happening against exploring all sorts of facets of the president and his family and so forth. Are you suggesting you want more investigations? How should this be dealt with?
And thank you for asking that, because I do want a thorough investigation of the FISA courts. They've been around long enough. Let's see, what have they been doing? How many cases, like the Verizon case, do we have where there was no particularity, the constitutional requirements were not met, not even close to being met, and yet you had a judge willing to just sign away Americans' constitutional rights? So I do think that, and that's basically what I was bringing up to Chairman Jerry Nadler today. I hope that we can work in a bipartisan way on this, because it is a threat to Americans' privacy. And, for the Democrats, privacy used to be a big deal. Now, I saw when they took the majority back in January of 2007, 8, 9, 10, and then during the Obama years, privacy really took a back seat to so many other things. Right. But it used to be that Republicans like me that are very concerned about constitutional rights, and Democrats like Jerry Nadler, we were very concerned about privacy rights and the abuses of a much too powerful federal government. And I saw during the Obama years they were ready to protect everything he did and never speak negatively about anything the Obama administration did. But there were abuses then, clearly, and we really do need to come together as two parties and come back to the basic concerns that many of the Democrats had about privacy, about civil liberties, about civil rights. I mean, nobody on that whole Judiciary Committee would ever support a hero like Martin Luther King Jr. being wiretapped. Right. Of course, that was Attorney General Kennedy that supported that. But those kind of abuses back in the Hoover days, and I thought we had gotten far enough away, but we find out we're not. Those things are still going on, maybe now with a FISA court order, but very great concerns. And I remember when we took up the reauthorization of Patriot Act provisions, it was one about allowing surveillance, wiretapping, listening in on Americans, and it was not supposed to ever happen unless an American was talking to a known foreign terrorist right. organization representative, And then there was this second part that said, or engaged in one of the DOJ back then. What does that mean? Does that mean if a person stands behind their curtain and watches their neighbor do something? I mean, it's clandestine. They're gathering intelligence on their neighbor. Is that the kind of thing that allows you to wiretap an American citizen? Oh, no. Well, it turns out they use everything they can to get wiretaps whenever they want them. It's a problem.
So any final words before we finish up?
No, but we do need to investigate how things could go so grossly wrong as they have, that led to the effort to take out Donald Trump, first from getting elected, and then, as Strzok called it, the insurance policy in case he did get elected to take him out. And we're just very, very fortunate they were unsuccessful in doing that. They have been attempting a coup using lawfare to try to do it. Thank God it didn't work.
Congressman Gohmert, thank you very much.
It's really great talking to you. I look forward to doing it again.
Yeah.
You promised, and I'll look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.